Right now, in this moment, you are conscious. You know you're here. You know you're watching this. You have a felt sense of yourself, a running inner commentary, a quiet awareness that you exist and that things are happening and that you are the one they're happening to. Hold on to that feeling, because tonight it will switch off, without warning, without permission, without so much as a goodbye, and you will have absolutely no memory of the moment it happened. Not a blurry memory, not a vague impression, nothing. A hard cut. 1 second you're a person lying in bed thinking thoughts. The next second you're a person waking up 8 hours later wondering why your alarm is so aggressively loud at this particular hour. In the entire gap in between, the precise moment your consciousness folded up and went somewhere you cannot follow is just missing. You've done this thousands of times, thousands, and you have never once caught yourself doing it. That should bother you more than it does. Here's the part nobody tells you. It's not that the memory got stored somewhere and then erased. It's not that something happened and you simply forgot it, the way you forget where you put your keys or the name of that actor in that film. The experience of falling asleep doesn't get recorded in the first place. Your brain doesn't lose the footage. It never hits record. And the reason why requires us to look at something your brain is doing every single night that is far stranger and far more unsettling than most people are prepared for. Let's start with the mechanism, because understanding why you can't remember falling asleep means understanding what your brain is actually doing in those final minutes, and it is nothing like what you assume. All day long, your brain has been running, processing, deciding, reacting, and as a byproduct of all that metabolic activity, it's been building up a chemical called adenosine, a neurochemical signal that accumulates hour by hour, slowly raising the biological cost of staying awake. The longer you're conscious, the heavier the adenosine load, and the louder the signal pushing you towards shutdown. By the time you crawl into bed, that signal is screaming. Simultaneously, your body's internal clock, a structure called the suprachiasmatic nucleus, buried inside your hypothalamus and roughly the size of a grain of rice, has been reading the fading light and telling the rest of your brain to start powering down. Melatonin releases, core body temperature drops fractionally, heart rate begins to slow. The entire physiological ecosystem is preparing for a scheduled blackout. And then, a cluster of neurons in the hypothalamus, the ventrolateral preoptic nucleus, which has genuinely one of the least poetic names in all of neuroscience, flips the switch. It starts actively suppressing the systems that keep you alert. It dials down the neural signals responsible for maintaining wakefulness. It quietly pulls the plug on the chemicals keeping your brain online. This is where things get interesting. Because the critical question isn't why you fall asleep, it's why you can't remember it happening. And the answer lives in a structure called the thalamus. Under normal conditions, right now as you watch this, your thalamus is doing something essential. It's acting as the brain's central relay station. Every piece of sensory information coming in from the outside world, everything you see, hear, feel, smell, passes through the thalamus on its way to your cortex, the outer layer of your brain responsible for conscious experience. The thalamus is the gatekeeper, the traffic controller, the reason the world feels real and present and continuous. When you fall asleep, the thalamus closes the gate. A structure called the reticulothalamic nucleus begins inhibiting the thalamus's relay cells, progressively cutting off the flow of incoming information to the cortex. The outside world stops being forwarded upstairs. The hum of the fan in the corner, the distant sound of a car, the feeling of the sheet against your arm, all of it stops being routed to the parts of your brain that would register it as conscious experience. And here's why that destroys memory. Your cortex, the part of your brain responsible for awareness, perception, and the formation of new memories, runs on input. It needs a continuous stream of incoming information to build coherent experience. Without that stream, it can't do its job. It starts going quiet, and a quiet cortex is not a cortex that's encoding memories. The hippocampus, your brain's primary architecture for converting present experience into storable memory, begins shifting away from active encoding. It stops taking notes. It starts doing something else entirely, something we'll come back to in a moment. So here's what's actually happening in those final minutes before you lose consciousness. The thalamus is closing down, the cortex is losing its data feed, the hippocampus is clocking out, and you, the version of you that could register any of this, that could notice what's happening and file it somewhere, is running on a system that is progressively, methodically dismantling its own ability to observe itself. It's the equivalent of trying to write down what's happening to you while someone is very calmly and very deliberately removing your hands. But that's not even the strangest part. There is a phase of this transition that almost no one knows about, a window lasting anywhere from a few seconds to several minutes that every human being alive passes through every single night, a state that is by any clinical definition genuinely psychedelic. It's called hypnagogia. Hypnagogia is the threshold between wakefulness and sleep, stage 1, the doorway. And while you're standing in it, your brain starts producing spontaneous sensory experiences that have no basis in physical reality. Imagery without anything to look at, sound without anything making noise, sensations of movement when your body is perfectly still. People who've been woken up during this phase, pulled back out of the doorway mid-crossing, report fragmented visual patterns, geometric shapes assembling and dissolving, faces that don't belong to anyone, a sudden sense of a place, vivid and specific, that evaporates the moment you try to describe it. And then there's the physical one, the one you almost certainly know but have never had a name for. You're lying there, drifting, and suddenly a lurch, a violent, involuntary whole-body jerk that snaps you back to full alertness with a gasp, your heart hammering, your partner staring at you from across the pillow with quiet concern. That's called a hypnic jerk, and it happens to roughly 60 to 70% of people on a regular basis. Here's what's happening. As your muscles begin to relax, a process your brain is actively initiating as part of sleep preparation, some part of your transitioning nervous system misreads the sudden drop in muscle tension as evidence that the body is in free fall, not lying down, falling. And so it fires an emergency correction signal through the motor cortex, ordering every major muscle group to catch themselves immediately. Your brain panicked while you were trying to go to sleep because it briefly forgot you were lying in a bed and not plummeting off something. This happens inside the most controlled, familiar, deliberately restful moment of your entire day. Your brain, faced with the simple task of allowing you to relax, catastrophically misread the situation and threw you at the ceiling. And by morning, you remember none of it. Not the geometric light show, not the phantom faces, not the free fall or the jerk. None of it made it out because the encoding machinery was already shutting down while it was happening. Every night, your brain stages a private, involuntary hallucination, complete with sound and sensation and a dramatic physical punchline, and then immediately destroys every record of it ever occurring. Now, here's where it gets genuinely strange. Sleep researchers describe the onset of sleep not as a single moment, but as a regional process. Different areas of your cortex don't all cross the threshold simultaneously. Some zones slip into sleep states, while neighboring areas are still showing waking activity. The motor cortex might still be partially alert, while the prefrontal cortex, the region responsible for self-awareness, for the sense of being a coherent self monitoring its own experience, has already gone dark. And which means there is no single moment you fall asleep. There are dozens of small moments scattered across different regions of your brain, happening in a slightly different sequence each night, a slow, uneven, overlapping regional shutdown.
And the part of your brain that would need to remember the process, the part that maintains your sense of being a self that things are happening to, is consistently one of the last areas awake and one of the first areas that stops filing reports. The observer goes offline before the observation ends. The narrator steps away from the microphone while the story is still happening.
There's one final layer, and it changes the frame entirely. Your brain doesn't passively fail to record the experience of falling asleep. It makes an active judgment, ruthless, efficient, and apparently unanimous across the entire human species, that this experience is not worth keeping. During sleep, your hippocampus isn't dormant, it's working, selectively consolidating the memories formed during the day, strengthening some, pruning others, making editorial decisions about what gets carried forward into long-term storage and what gets quietly discarded. The experience of falling asleep, the dim, dissolving, progressively incoherent final minutes of consciousness, gets discarded every single night. Your brain has assessed it and concluded it contains nothing actionable, no information with survival value, no emotional content worth preserving, just the feeling of getting hazier in the dark. Your brain is a ruthless editor, and the last thing you experience before ceasing to exist for 8 hours gets left on the floor. So here's what's actually happening to you tonight, and every night, stripped down to its components. Adenosine and your circadian clock tip the neurochemical balance away from wakefulness. The hypothalamus flips its switch. The thalamus closes the gate on incoming sensory data. The cortex loses its feed and goes quiet. The hippocampus stops encoding. The prefrontal cortex, the seat of self-awareness, the part of you that knows you're you, powers down. And somewhere inside all of that, the part of you that could have noticed any of it stops existing before the process finishes. The hallucinations come and go unwitnessed. The hypnic jerk fires and fades. The brain waves slow from the fast rhythms of waking thought through relaxed patterns and into the long, slow rolls of deep sleep. And not one frame of any of it survives. But sit with the deeper implication for a moment, because it's worth the discomfort. You feel like a continuous being. You experience yourself as a single, unbroken thread of consciousness running from birth to now, a coherent self persisting through time, accumulating experiences, connected from one moment to the next. That feeling is real, but it is not the whole truth. That thread is cut every single night. You cease, not metaphorically, not philosophically, but neurologically, for roughly a third of your life. And the reason you don't experience that absence, the reason it doesn't feel like an absence at all, is that experiencing the absence would require the very thing that goes absent. You can't feel unconscious, because feeling anything is consciousness. The version of you that wakes up tomorrow morning will have every memory that exists up to tonight. It will have your personality, your habits, your relationships, your sense of being the same person who started reading this sentence. And it will be missing one thing: any direct experience of the gap. What persists through sleep is not experience, it's the record of experience. Not the flame, just the data the flame left behind. And every morning you pick up that record, and you feel like the flame. And it is seamless, and it is convincing, and it is almost certainly fine. Almost. The question, the one your brain will work very hard to shuffle out of your attention before you can sit with it properly, isn't really why you can't remember falling asleep. It's what exactly you are when you can.